welcome to episode 2 of Full Throttle here on Unprecedented TV, where we rev up the conversation on issues that matter to British drivers and road users generally and beyond. I'm Brian Gregory, Policy Director of the Alliance of British Drivers, and today we're diving into the topic of that's burning up the headlines on net zero and its impact on road users, on all of us, in fact, on all of our ways of life. The question really is net zero incompatible with economic growth and profitability? The government seems to think it's not, but is that a pipe dream? We're thrilled to have on the programme this morning David Turver, author of the incisive Substack Eigenvalues, which goes into those topics. So let's dive in, really. It may be that the government's in a collision course, really, with the goals of profitability and net zero. So let's unpack all this, introduce David, and he can explain what the difficulties are with the direction the government plans to travel and what we actually need to be a profitable, high growth, low energy cost economy.
Good. Hello there, everybody. Just before we bring David out of the green room, we'll let him have a few more M&Ms. I'm Paul Naylor. I am the Communications Director for the Alliance of British Drivers, and it's great to be here for another episode of Full Throttle.
Absolutely.
The first episode went down very well. We've got a lot of really positive feedback. As drivers, we all feel the pinch of policies like net zero every day, whether it's fuel costs, EV mandates, or road restrictions, sold as being green. Today, we're sitting down with David Turver, whose recent piece, Mission Impossible: Economic Growth and Net Zero, argues that the UK's clean energy push could stall the economy in its tracks. Dave is not afraid to call out the contradictions in the government's plans, and we're going to explore how these policies hit our wallets, our jobs, and probably more importantly to the majority of us, our freedoms. And it's probably something that we don't even realise how important that is. So let's hit the accelerator, Brian. Let's get David onto the show and let's go full throttle.
Absolutely. Good morning, David, and welcome indeed to Unprecedented TV and to Full Throttle. Feeling well this morning?
Yeah, it's good, thank you. I've been out with the dog.
Good.
Lovely weather, and now I'm on here with you guys. So thanks very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Okay, so let's dive in. Can I give some background? What is your background, and how did you end up in the energy security sphere?
Well, by background, I'm an engineer, so I studied something called the Special Engineering Program at Brunel back in the 1980s, which was sort of like a fairly unique course in that it covered the generalities of engineering, mechanical production, electrical systems control, and so on. Yeah. But it also covered finance. So the only core course that I had to do in the final year was finance. So I guess that gives me a unique perspective of being able to integrate sort of economics and engineering and things that are technical. Now, it has to be said that for most of my career, I didn't do any what you might call proper engineering. I was a consultant for a long while doing big systems implementations, company mergers and demergers and turnarounds and all that sort of stuff. And for a long time, all the energy stuff just sort of like passed me by. I might listen to something on the radio and think, well, that doesn't sound quite right. But, people have busy lives and so on. And you just think, well, it's perhaps been misreported and they really do know what they were doing. But I started getting concerned when I think it was sort of late 2021 when all the energy companies started going bust. And I could see the gas prices going up and so on. But then, so I thought I'd pay a bit more attention to net zero. And I just did like a fag packet calculation of, well, if we're all going to use EVs and we're all going to have heat pumps, how much more electricity are we going to need? And I wrote to my MP with this letter, which he passed on to the minister, where I asked, well, how much more electricity are we going to need? What's peak demand going to look like? What's the generation mix to meet it? And how much is it all going to cost? And the letter I got back from the minister at the time didn't contain a single number. And that led me to believe that actually perhaps they really don't know what they're doing. So I then sort of cogitated that for a while, and I sort of retired and decided I needed to do something to keep my brain active. I started my Substack, and the very first article that I wrote was on what I call the hidden costs of renewables. So I went and did a lot of research to find out, what all the different subsidy schemes were, how much they all cost, what are the extra costs of renewables, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not sure what I expected, but I certainly didn't expect that article to go quite as viral as it did. So there's a chap in America who goes under the handle Mining Atoms, and he sort of like retweeted it and restacked the Substack. And after the first week, I had something like 250 subscribers. So I thought, well, I'm onto something here. So, and it's just gone from there. So now I'm over 4,500 subscribers. My Twitter feed is going mental. All my followers on there are going up as well. So, and I originally thought I was going to talk about other things other than energy, but there's so much going on in energy that I just you can just keep going. There's just an endless stream of out by all sorts of different people that it takes a bit of time to debunk. So you can do an article a week, sometimes 2 a week, and it's going from there. And then I get invited by you guys and others onto podcasts and so on to talk about it.
Excellent. And there's a network of you same guys talking about energy, Catherine Porter in America, Robert Bryce, David Blackmon. There's a whole list of people right across the developed world who've got a really clear handle on energy policy, energy costs. And the key thing you mentioned at the very start, cost benefit analysis, which seems to be totally lost on our government.
Yes, absolutely lost.
I approached it from the chemistry side. And there's papers by Net Zero Watch and McKinsey estimating net zero's cost at anywhere up to $500 billion a year for its currency. And if you work out the temperature reduction that those policies will deliver, it's 1/10 of a degree Celsius worldwide by 2050 and 2/10 of a degree by 2100. Well, 2/10 of a degree, if you look at the satellite temperature measurements, they go up and down by 0.5 degree in a month. So you wouldn't even know if it had been achieved. And if you work out the cost is just £7,500 trillion per degree Celsius. Well,
I mean, it's such a ridiculous policy.
If you just actually work on adaptation, even the World Bank says adaptation only costs about 170 trillion or something, which is a stupid number anyway. But once you look at that, I think, well, this is insanity on rocket boosters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry, I've interrupted you.
No, I did. I did a piece and a talk which I entitled "Net Zero is Worse Than Climate Change," where I went through those arguments basically.
The cure's worse than the illness.
That's a great title. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think for me, the biggest problem is that even if there were a problem, which I don't believe there is, but even if there were a problem, we are going down a route that is going to make this country look ridiculous on the world stage. We're going to bankrupt ourselves while bigger and more richer companies than us are not going to adopt this stupid notion of net zero. They're going to get richer off the back of us by producing the equipment that we're then going to install in this country. It's absolutely mental.
Well, of course, they are following the track that we followed 150 years ago. I mean, if you think when we started the Industrial Revolution, the average sort of life expectancy was between 30 and 40 years. Now it's doubled. Yeah. And we're healthier, we live longer, happier lives in general, although propaganda's trying to make it less happy, I think. And we had when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, we had a vibrant economy and low energy costs, which were driving progress. Yeah. Now we're heading backwards. We're retrogressing to pre-industrial status almost.
Yes, indeed. So, in essence, the economy is driven by energy. So, because you need energy for everything, even services. Yeah. And if you make energy expensive, you make producing anything more expensive, which makes you less competitive. I mean, it really is as simple as that.
Yeah. We find ourselves in a very crazy situation here.
Okay, so let's try and get back on track.
Yeah.
Why are governments so unthinkingly wedded to renewable energy generation, David, do you think?
Well, I think probably the whole thing started with what you might call a noble lie. So if you think back sort of like 25, 30 years ago, I think there was some genuine fears that, CO2 and so on was going to be very dangerous. Yeah. But since then, all of the estimates of climate sensitivity to CO2 have come down. So, roughly speaking, there's about a degree or a degree and a half of warming per doubling of CO2. And that's assuming that the absorption frequencies and so on are not already saturated, which is actually quite a big assumption. But even if we take that at face value, then there might have been a need to do this stuff. So then politicians get hooked on this idea of clean renewable energy, and that makes them look good because they're saving the planet. And then they get sort of wedded to the ideology, and then there's all sorts of stuff that come around it. So there's lots of billionaire funded think tanks that come out with pseudoscience telling us that renewables are cheaper, without ever quite explaining if they're cheaper, why do they need to do so much stuff it is. And then it gets enshrined in law. So Theresa May, bless her cotton socks, decided that they sort of ramp up the Climate Change Act to be net zero, not just an 8% reduction in CO2. And then because it's enshrined in law, that gives license to government bodies, quangos, and so on, essentially to enforce it, and that's what they're doing. And certainly at the moment, the official bodies are immune to criticism. Because just basic logic tells you that they're wrong. It's interesting. I did a piece on the Climate Change Committee's 7th carbon budget a few months ago, showing how their assumptions were completely wide of the mark. So they're assuming that offshore wind is going to cost us something like £38 per megawatt hour for 2030 delivery, and the AR6 allocation round last year awarded a contract in today's money it's like 85 for Hornsea 4, and that's been cancelled as an economic. So we know the price is higher than that. And they're offering like something in 2025 money, 117 pounds per megawatt hour for fixed bottom offshore wind, which is like, broadly speaking, 3 times what the Climate Change Committee said it was going to cost. And when you go and ask the Climate Change Committee, well, how do you come about this, and where do all your costs come from, then they sort of like clam up. So I've got a couple of freedom information requests for the CCC that are with the Information Commissioner at the moment. But it's interesting that Claire Coutinho, the Shadow Energy Secretary, has picked up on this. So a couple of days ago, she wrote a letter to the new chairman saying, well, actually, I don't think the numbers add up. Can you come and explain? And make revisions to your plans accordingly. And well, we'll have to see where that goes. But I think that has the potential to bring the 7th carbon budget, falling down like a pack of cards. Because she's absolutely right. I mean, these are all public numbers. She's not made them up. What's odd is that the government DESNES, the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, in 2023 they put out their what they call a generation cost report, and they came up with what they call a levelized cost of energy for offshore wind of about £44 per megawatt hour from memory. And this is the same body that's awarding the contracts under the allocation rounds, and it's offering 3 times, well, 2.5 times more than it said the price would be. It won't withdraw that report, and then that report gets cited in the House of Lords in response to a question from Lord Frost, and all sorts of other bodies like the Carbon Briefs and the Embers and all that sort of thing, they quote it as though it's gospel, and even the House of Commons Library quotes it as gospel, and it's just clearly wrong.
Yeah, but I mean, from the most fundamental levels, if we step back to the whole carbon dioxide question, the problem is they talk about carbon dioxide emissions and as if man-made carbon dioxide emissions are it, and man-made emissions are about 3.5%.
Ignore that.
That packet of crisps you've got, you need to stop messing with it.
I wish. That was the pitter-patter of my dog going past me.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So the problem is, even if we stopped all of man's emissions now, it wouldn't make any difference to the climate, because 96.5% of the emissions actually come from nature, which we have no control over.
Yes.
So what is the point in trying to control our emissions when the rest, I mean, it's like trying to tweak the direction a storming tiger's going by pulling fur out its tail. It's just bonkers. Anyway, sorry. And
the margin of error in those calculations is probably bigger than our emissions as well. So I mean,
absolutely. You begin to wonder, if the treatment's not making the patient any healthier, and they're doubling down on it, and you start to wonder about the competence and sanity of the physician, if you see what I mean.
Yes, indeed. I've done a piece on that where I've said that the net zero cure is worse than the climate change disease.
Yeah.
And we will be far better adopting an adaptation strategy, as we've done for the past 10,000 years, the history of human civilization, and we've done quite well out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So why is it just hubris that's causing all these politicians to sort of try to distort the facts on renewables?
I think there's a lot of hubris, and there's a lot of money involved. I mean, a lot of people talk about oil and gas lobbying and all that sort of stuff, but it pales into insignificance to the billions that are put into what you might call green lobbying by the likes of Bloomberg and Christopher Hone and
Rockefeller,
Lisbeth Rousing, and the Hewlett Packard Foundation, and all these sort of like billionaire funded foundations that fund all these what you might call fake
charities,
grassroots charities that then just put out propaganda, basically.
Yeah, and they're not fact checked by the media at all. I mean, not properly, objectively fact checked.
No, in fact, the fact checkers like BBC Verify tend to use the output of these things as their evidence base rather than actually challenging it.
Yeah, absolutely. I said that essentially the UK has the highest energy prices in the developed world, but when you look at the energy cost against economic development and economic growth graph, there are no high energy cost, high growth, high profitability countries. I mean, so basically what our policies seem to be doing to me is that at the moment we are up towards the top right of that chart, and we are being driven down towards the bottom left by net zero. So we're being in amongst Somalia, Burundi and Madagascar and places like that at the rate we're going, because we'll have no manufacturing industry left, and our economic growth will be that of an arthritic snail on crutches.
Yes, indeed. So there's another chart that shows that our energy consumption and electricity generation are actually falling. So on that chart, on the x-axis, on the y-axis, we're coming down. And I did a piece on this a little while ago, and the NESO, the National Energy System Operator, they produce something called FES, the Future Energy Scenarios. And if you do the arithmetic on where they want us to be in 2050, our energy consumption is going to be on a par with countries like Brazil and Uzbekistan and Algeria.
Yeah, exactly.
And their GDP per capita is half hours at best. So you're restricting energy consumption is a recipe for poverty, and essentially one of the ways that this is undeclared, but one of the ways that they're getting us towards net zero is to consume less energy.
Yeah.
Now, some of it is there's a lot of what these people say. There's a grain of truth in that if we move to an electrified society, then it's probably overall more efficient to run an EV than it is to run a petrol car. So, a modern petrol car might run at 35% efficiency or something, and an EV you might have, say, 10% losses in transmitting the electricity to it and so on, and maybe 5% on charging and discharging the battery. So it's maybe about 85% efficient, something like that. So to get the same vehicle miles out of it, you use less energy. But the assumptions that are using there are very, very aggressive. And I personally don't think they're achievable, and they don't allow for any economic growth or for new technologies like artificial intelligence or something like that.
We did try to do an analysis of this, David. I'd be quite happy to send it. We called it Cradle to Grave, because we tried to look at the life cycle analysis of a petrol or diesel vehicle against an electric one, and right from manufacturing the car and what's involved with that, what rare earths have you got to mine, all the other stuff, and stack that up against its performance, transmission losses, all the rest of them, for both types of vehicles. And what we found was when you did that detailed analysis, we couldn't see that there was a really significant advantage for battery electric vehicles. And of course, the other thing is, nobody's mentioning this, but a petrol or diesel car nowadays can run for over 20 years before you scrap it. But battery electric vehicles, 8 years, the battery's shot, the vehicle's shot. So, you'll have to buy at least 2 electric vehicles, every one if it's a conventional internal combustion engine one. And as I say, I'm quite happy to send you that. And if you want to run an eye over it and help us to update it, because it needs updating, we did it 2 or 3 years ago, we'd be really happy to work with you on that.
I'd quite happy to look at that, and that result doesn't surprise me, because there's a huge amount of embedded energy in the battery itself.
Yes. And worse, in the infrastructure, there's a huge hydrocarbon footprint in the infrastructure that's needed for all the wind turbines and the copper cables to bring the power from the Orkneys or wherever the hell it is to London, which is where the major consumption for electric vehicles is. It doesn't make any sense from a resource perspective. And of course, then there's all the stuff about child labor and Congo and all the rest of it, cobalt, lithium, which is a really nasty material. And then, of course, the other issue that's not really being broached is the problem that electric vehicles can just spontaneously ignite if there's a thermal runaway. And if it's on a roll-off ferry, then in general, one goes up and then everything else goes up, and you can't actually put the fire out, and they have to wait until the thing either burns itself out or sinks.
Well, EVs are always live, aren't they? They're constantly live. I mean, I was traveling back from Bath a few months back, and I was on I think it was the M5, and there was an EV on fire on the hard shoulder. I've never seen flames like it. They look different. The flames look different.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a massive reaction once the thermal runaway in.
And the smoke that was being generated.
Passengers have to get out really quickly, because otherwise the gases actually kill them, and the emergency services can't get near because the fire's so intense. So there is a huge risk. I mean, they may not be any more prone to spontaneously combusting than conventional vehicles. The problem is when they do go up, you can't control the fire in the same way. You can get a carbon dioxide extinguisher, and mostly you can put out most electrical fires in conventional vehicles, not with BEVs.
No, and there's been a number of vehicles and buildings that have banned EVs being anywhere in their proximity. So
lots of Norwegian service providers won't carry EVs on their ferries anymore. Anyway, sorry, we digressed, David. Apologies. We were talking about the pursuit of economic growth at all costs, and we've just looked at that chart, which basically says the trajectory that they're on is actually going to stifle growth and do the opposite of what they're promising, because of the simple energy costs and dynamics that, no high energy cost, high growth, high profitability economies. And I think you produced a chart, sort of a sector chart, like I forget what they call it. It's a Igor Ansoff chart.
Boston Matrix.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well,
Okay. Well, let's give a bit of an explanation of this. So the Office for National Statistics, the ONS, they produce statistics of productivity for each of our industrial sectors. And I've converted that into a chart.
Yeah.
So the x-axis is the growth of those sectors relative to the whole economy, and the y-axis is the absolute productivity of those sectors.
So GVA is gross value added. Gross value added, is it?
Yes, it's yes, gross value added, and gross value added per hour. So if we where those coloured sectors intersect, that's like 100% growth and 100% productivity. So that represents the whole economy.
Yeah.
So all those dots above on the y-axis, they're more productive than the whole economy. So mining and extraction, for instance, oil and gas, and all productive industries are, generally speaking, more productive than the rest of the economy.
Yeah.
But you can see that they're to the left of the 100% line, so they're shrinking relative to the rest of the economy. And mining and extraction is, in fact, shrinking absolutely.
Yeah.
The green sector, that's sectors that are growing faster than the whole economy and are more productive than the whole economy. So that's financial services. I'm not for a moment suggesting that we should reduce that. In fact, we probably need to encourage it. Yeah. And then the yellow sector is things that are growing faster than the whole economy, but are less productive than the rest of the economy. So that's like admin and support. So that's, dare I say, that's things like your Sercos and your Capitas and so on, healthcare, and services more generally. Yeah. So a lot of people talk about the UK having a productivity problem and a productivity puzzle, but when you put it like this, then it's actually not a puzzle at all. We've grown things that are less productive than the rest of the economy, and we've shrunk things that are more productive than the rest of the economy. Yeah. So it's hardly surprising that productivity overall in the economy is struggling. Yeah. And if we think about those productive industries, almost by definition, they are energy intensive industries. So they use a lot of energy and they use a lot of capital.
My business career was
why they've got high productivity in terms of gross value added per hour worked. And the more that we make our energy expensive and the more scarce we make energy, then the more these sectors are going to struggle, and the more the whole economy is going to struggle. So what we need to do is find a way of making energy cheaper and more abundant, and then we can grow those sectors more aggressively, and the productivity of the nation as a whole will benefit. Yeah. Now, there's an interesting corollary from that as well, because people talk about, UK management is short-sighted and they don't do investment and all the rest of it. But imagine you're Jim Ratcliffe and you're running a chemicals company or a petrochems company. Yeah. You might sweat the assets that you've already got because it sort of like makes sense, but you're not going to make new investment when our electricity and gas prices are many times those of America, for instance, which is why he's relocating a lot of his business to America. Yeah. And we lose that investment too. And it's not a short-sighted decision. It's a perfectly rational one, because if our energy is so expensive, then he can't run a profitable business. Yeah, compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and that's certainly, the industry that I spent most of my career in before retiring was the titanium pigment industry, which is used for paint, plastics, rubber, all sorts of things. And energy was over a third of the costs of the operation. When you're doing either large-scale bucket and stick chemistry, which is the old process, the sulfate process for making the pigment, use a huge amount of energy. But the newer, cleaner process uses titanium tetrachloride, which you oxidize in a plasma, in a big magnetic bottle in effect, and you regenerate the pigment in milliseconds. But the energy costs are enormous because you need this plasma flame. It's not really a flame, it's a plasma, to actually regenerate the pigment. And it's just mind-bogglingly expensive, with British energy costs. And the factory, which is quite near to me on the northeast coast of England, it's only running at about 2/3 of capacity. And if you want to make money with it, it needs to be running at 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And the energy costs are throttling out of existence, as we've seen with so many other large-scale manufacturing industries, which are closing down, refining, all the other things as well, which just testifies to what you've been saying for the last few minutes, David.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've diagnosed the malaise. But if somebody had an outbreak of sanity in him, and sort of appointed you as the minister in charge of UK energy security tomorrow, what would you do to dig us out of a hole?
Oh, great question. Well, before answering that, it's probably worthwhile cantering through all the things that are adding to it, particularly to our electricity costs.
Yeah.
So there's a myth that renewables are cheaper. And again, that comes from a sort of like a kernel of truth, in that the marginal cost of a solar panel or a wind turbine is very, very low. But of course, the marginal cost is not the full cost.
No.
So this shows us the sort of an example of what's called the merit order. So the marginal cost of renewables is the sort of light blue at the bottom, which is next to nothing. So, and if demand is at a certain level, then we use natural gas, which mostly sets the price of our wholesale electricity.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the cost of natural gas production are more than the marginal cost of renewables. But if we take a CFD funded offshore wind farm, for example,
CFD is contract for difference. Yeah.
Yes, a contract for difference funded offshore wind farm. Its marginal cost might be £10 per megawatt hour or something. Yeah. Natural gas today probably costs about £75 per megawatt hour, but the average CFD funded offshore wind farm costs about 150. So they cost twice as much. If it's funded by the renewable obligation certificate, it's probably 3 times as much, something like that. Well, a bit less than that, because they get paid their renewable obligation certificate on top of what they get from the market rate set by gas.
Yeah.
So,
but then also there's a curtailment issue, because if the wind farm's working, but we can't handle the power on the grid, and we can't store that energy, they're actually paid not to generate. So they're paid when they generate, and they're paid when they're not generating.
Yes, indeed.
That is an insane arrangement.
Yes, it's like sort of like going to Tesco's and because you only buy 1 packet of cornflakes, but they've got 2 on the shelf, then they'll charge you for both of them. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a heads I win, tails you lose strategy. It's bonkers.
Yes. So that's an example of the subsidies, and if we just sort of add them all up, the renewable obligation certificates cost us about 7.5 billion. The contracts for difference cost us about 2.5, and there's another subsidy called feed-in tariff, which costs us about 2. So that's roughly 12 billion in subsidies. We pay about another 2.7 on what's called grid balancing costs, which is to pay those curtailment costs that you mentioned, to pay wind farms not to produce, which when you put it like that, sounds ridiculous. But also sometimes
why can't we extend that to natural gas then? Because, a lot of the time they're running suboptimally because we're feeding in all this renewable stuff. Why aren't they paid, a contract for difference arrangement, so that when they're only generating at 60%, they get a rebate? Because I think the cost is about 6 billion a year, something for natural gas generation, 7 billion, something like that. But it's not run optimally. It's like the factory situation I was talking about before. If we ran it optimally, the cost would come down, and we'd still have reliable, strategic energy when we want it and when we need it, instead of the arrangement where now NISO, I think it is, talking about people moderating their energy consumption to fit what the industry can produce, which is the absolute opposite of what you want from an energy industry. It should be able to supply reliable, dispatchable energy 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, irrespective of weather conditions, so that when you turn the plug on, the power comes on.
Yes, exactly. We'll come to that in a moment. So so there's about 2.7 in grid balancing costs, another 1.2, 1.3 on what's called the capacity market, which is providing backup for when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. So if you add all that up, that's about 16 billion. And just for comparison, you did mention this. The amount of gas we used for electricity in 2024 at today's prices would cost about 5.5 billion. So it's an absolute travesty to say that it's gas is causing the problem.
Yeah.
So we've got all these subsidies, and then on top of the basic cost of electricity for natural gas, we add a carbon tax as well, which is roughly speaking about £25 per megawatt hour. So of that 75, 20 to 25 is carbon tax. So now we come to policy. So I think the first thing to do would be to get rid of the carbon tax. So that would cut the market rate of electricity by roughly 30%, from 75 to 50-ish. It would also reduce the revenue of those renewables that are funded by the renewable obligation certificate.
Yeah.
The next thing to do would be to look at that renewables obligation certificate, the ROC system as a whole. So that sort of rests on some secondary legislation where the energy minister has to decide how many of these certificates electricity suppliers have to buy. If he just said, well, actually, they don't have to buy any, then the whole renewable obligation system would collapse. It'd be worth nothing. I would think substantially all of the wind farms that rely on that for the subsidy will become unprofitable, or at best marginally profitable.
And isn't this in effect what's happening in America with Donald Trump has passed legislation, and is it Ørsted in the US of the investment in new wind projects has collapsed, and they've had to issue about 9.7 billion rights issue to dig them out of a financial hole or something?
Yes, that's true too. So Ørsted are the company that were behind what's called Hornsea 4, which was awarded a contract last year and the allocation round 6. In today's price is about £85 a megawatt hour. They pulled out of that earlier this year, saying they can't make it work. They also haven't managed to sell a stake in Hornsea 3 that they won ages ago. And now, and they were struggling to sell the stakes in some of the offshore wind farms in America. And now the Trump administration has put a stop order on another one of their offshore wind farms, Revolution, I think, from memory, which is part built. And now they're not allowed. Now they put a moratorium on building any more of it, which has certainly put the cat amongst the pigeons, because they announced their rights issue before that stop order. And their share price has plunged as a result of the rights issue, and it's plunged again as a result of this stop order. So Ørsted are in a bit of a mess.
And they're owned by the Danish government.
50% owned by the Danish government, and the rest, the 10% by Equinor, which is the Norwegian energy company, and then odds and sods of the rest.
Okay, so I mean, the whole thing's a mess, and certainly it seems that the philosophy or the policy that Trump's following, which is to damp down onshore and offshore wind investment, maybe a bit more, what's the word, more conducive to use of solar, because there's part of America where solar might make sense. I mean, why we're doing it in this country doesn't make any sense to me. We're at just the right latitude for it to be pretty damn inefficient here where we are, UK and Northern Ireland, and yet we're still going ahead, gangbusters with putting in solar farms that are going to just be a huge drain on the economy, not going to solve our energy problems, and in fact likely to amplify them. And yet Mr. Miliband is totally committed to economic Armageddon, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, there's quite a lot to unpack there. The World Bank did a report, I think earlier this year, and the UK and Ireland were the two worst countries for grid scale solar.
Yeah.
And it's not a surprise. We're above, like 55 degrees north or whatever.
Yeah.
So we don't get much sun, and there's a big seasonal variation. So we get quite a lot of solar, in June, July, when we don't need it because that demand is lowest, and we get, the square root of sod all solar in the winter when demand is highest, and absolutely none at all when demand is at its absolute highest on a cold winter evening.
Yeah. It's the exact reverse of a sane energy policy.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly reverse.
I think I'm right in saying as well that heat pumps work at the best when at a certain temperature. So when they're needed the most, that's when they're totally inefficient.
Useless when the temperatures are low.
Yeah.
Yes. So the bigger the difference between the outside temperature and the inside temperature you want, the less efficient the heat pump is.
Yeah.
So that's called the coefficient of performance. So if it's like -5 outside, the coefficient of performance, falls through the floor.
Yeah.
Of course, which is when you need it most. So you're going to use a lot more electricity than you would otherwise to get, the same temperature in your living room.
Yeah.
So if it's 24 degrees outside, fine, have your heating on.
Yes, it's quite efficient for making hot water, but
yeah.
Okay, well, so basically what we've established is that the government and its advisors don't really seem to have the faintest idea what a sensible energy policy looks like, but they're just driving down that route based on an ideological perception rather than hard scientific reality.
Yes, that's true, and they must know that they're doing that, because we talked about the Gen Cost report earlier and compared that to the prices that they're offering in the contract for difference allocation rounds, and they're 2 or 3 times higher. So you can't be that. They can't all be so stupid as not to notice that. So they must know, yet they're still doing it, which is unforgivable, really.
It is. It's a recipe for total deindustrialization, which is what we've been seeing progressively over the last 3 decades. Mm-hmm. And no sane politician would do that. So, you have to ask, what is motivating these people? It's very worrying.
Well, there's an element of ego of leading on the world stage and all that sort of stuff, and the potential for jobs beyond politics in the various clean blob organizations in the UN or the IMF or the World Bank or something. Which is probably the motivation.
Yeah, a really good cartoon that I saw recently when it's got David Miliband standing on the edge of a cliff with sheep jumping over it, and he says, follow me, I'm leading the world, or something like that. That pretty much summarizes the situation that we're in.
Yes.
So, David, I guess it's probably about the right time to curtail them. It's been very useful, very interesting. So where can people find all your work? Where can they access it? On your Substack?
Yeah, so I'm the author of the Eigenvalue Substack. The URL for that is davidturver.substack.com.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you got my article from earlier this week. We're now paying what I call the moron premium on our energy bill. It was termed that we're paying a moron premium on our on the government debt, on the national debt. There's more on energy policy on that article. You see there, what if we ditch net zero? I did quite an
that's the tram conundrum, I think you called it. Is it?
Yeah, it's called the trolley problem.
Trolley problem. That's it.
Which is a sort of like one of philosophy is if you can see a trolley bus coming on the rails and it's about to kill 5 people, would you switch to switch so it only killed 1? And I'm suggesting that essentially net zero is a version of the trolley problem where we're about to kill off society and we need to divert the train so we destroy the green blob.
Yeah.
A green blob.
I certainly support that motion. That's my vote.
Oh dear.
And the second place you can find me is on Twitter. I'm at 7Kiwi on Twitter. I'm sort of like north of 9,500 followers on there now. Something like 4,500 subscribers to my Substack.
Yeah. Okay. All right, David. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. You've been very informative. I hope we've helped to publicise what you're doing. Make a lot more people think about what we're being told by politicians and their spads, and try to change this situation, which is mind-boggling.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, David. It's been
well, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Very interesting.
It's been good fun talking.
Yeah, I will send you the document on Cradle to Grave, and we will invite you back at a point in the future. You know, because this is an evolving topic. I'm sure we'll come back to it.
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for what you do, David.